Hi, everyone.
Hello. All right, people are trickling in. That's good. Why don't we, last week, I think we heard from you about where you're logging in from, which country. Yeah, there you go, Austin. Why don't some of you comment as to whether you already applied to the Hustleverse as well? We'd be curious to know how many people in the audience have already applied, or you're still on the fence, or you're curious. And oh, cool.
Woohoo!
Perfect. Applied. I think we're just mostly curious about, who's logging in for us. Okay, awesome. On the fence. Cool, Britt. Um, Oklahoma City for Ravi. Do we have anybody logging in from outside of the US? Oh, Pavan, we're talking about, you said apply to, and then question mark. We're talking about the Hustleverse. I will talk about it in a second, but it is one of the reasons that we're here, which is that we have a program that will help people in Web2 transition to Web3 projects and careers. We're mostly looking for builders and operators. So people who might be, engineers, marketers, community builders, product managers who want to, dive into perhaps a company that operates in Web3. This is the community to be in, where we're going to be learning all about it together. Perfect. Yeah, Hung just put in the link to the Hustleverse as well. So if you want to click on that, it will definitely explain better than what I think I just did. Perfect. Thank you, Hung. Oh, somebody's logging in. Ronnie's logging in from Paris. That's amazing. And we've got Mexico as well. Thanks, Ashley. And Bangladesh. I love it when this happens. You just get to see like how small the world really is. Okay, well, we've got people in here now, so I think why don't we just at least get started with the intros. I know some of you logging in do already know us, but perhaps for those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Lydia Biyunin. I am the program director for the Hustleverse. I had a past life as a startup founder, which was very exciting, very difficult, and it brought me sort of to the Hustle Fund team. That's how I met Elizabeth. And, I just have experience creating communities and programs for in the past startup founders, and now looking to transition to, people who might be employees or also founders who are looking to get into Web3. Hung, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Hung Pham. I am the creative director here at Hustle Fund, also the founder of the Hustleverse. So prior to joining Hustle Fund, I was myself a founder for 8 years, and I've been a crypto and Web3 investor since 2016. So been very in the space for a bit now, very excited about the future and looking forward to helping everyone here transition over.
Great. And hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Yin. I'm one of the founders of Hustle Fund. We are a pre-seed VC fund. We have done a number of crypto investments into early stage startups, as well as many other categories as well. And Hung has pretty much taught me everything I know about crypto, and hopefully he can teach you all everything that he knows as well.
Perfect. Yes. And I think that's kind of the nature of the community as well, where we're all, no matter what level we're at in crypto, we're all going to be sharing this information with each other. Just to give you a little bit of an insight, I would say, Hung is our resident expert. Elizabeth certainly, knows a lot and has written on the topic. And if you follow her Twitter, you know that she's just a wealth of information. And I myself am kind of a newbie, as well as many of you, who's trying to, catch up as quickly as possible. And I think thanks to Hung, that's happening. So we do welcome all levels of knowledge in the Hustleverse, and we ourselves are a testament to that, I would say. Speaking of the Hustleverse, I mean, this is one of our events leading up to the mint of the Hustleverse Passport, which we will explain again. We do have an event happening next week that I will tell you a little bit about at the end of this session. But what I do want to draw your attention on is that there is a deadline to apply, and that is April 18th. And certainly get your applications in before that, because we're sifting through many applications. I won't say the number just yet, because I think it'll be it might deter you because there's just so many. I'm a little bit worried about that, but let me tell you, we're really curating an amazing community of people. So if you're somebody who is transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3 or is thinking about it, please do apply, and we will get back to you, and perhaps you can be part of our community. The other thing I want to encourage you to do, again, if you do follow Elizabeth, you might have seen this, is that Elizabeth did write an amazing blog post, what if everything went right in crypto? And I think it would allow you, thanks Elizabeth for the link, yeah. And I think it would give you a really good idea, sort of a very high level look at why crypto is significant. Prativa, the link to apply is on the Hustleverse page that is just a little bit above there, posted by Hung, and Hung will post it again, I'm sure, but the button to apply is there. So please do go through the Hustleverse, through the Hustleverse website to apply. Please do read Elizabeth's blog post. I think it would really kind of get you excited, as it got me really excited about all the possibilities of crypto. And then lastly, I just want to set out expectations for today's talk. We promised to go deep dive into Web3. Now, the reality is these terms are difficult. A lot of them get technical. And the truth is that you need to spend hundreds of hours reading and researching to really understand everything. But the one thing we want you to walk away with today is perhaps sort of a mind map. I find that's what's most challenging for me when I start learning something new, is that there's so many terms and I don't understand how they all connect and what they mean to each other, how they relate. So today we want you to walk away with a little bit of an understanding of how these terms relate, and sort of maybe the weight you should give to some versus the others. Like maybe you should really know what the Ethereum blockchain is versus like how a smart contract works in detail. Things like that, so that you can walk away and do your own research and actually feel like you have some level of understanding, so you can sift through all the information out there. Hung also did mention that YouTube is something we all use to get an understanding of crypto because it does make it so easy. We'll share a couple of our channels, favorite channels perhaps at the end, but we do encourage you, try YouTube, obviously Google everything, but we'll do our best today. So that was a very long-winded explanation as to what's going to happen today. Let's just dive right in. We did receive your questions. We did incorporate them. Thank you for everyone who submitted your questions. It is definitely not too late. Please do submit your questions in the Q&A window. Please use that window and not the chat, because last time it got a little bit hairy, and I certainly cannot promise that we will pick out each question from the chat. So please do use the Q&A option. And I do want to say that perhaps I won't call on your question as we go through the conversation, just because I'm looking for a specific time that we dive into that topic to ask that question. So do stay patient. That might be a possibility as well, that you ask your question and gets answered a little bit later. Okay, having said all that, why don't we just dive right in? I do see that everyone's kind of ready to go. So this is the difficult one that we're just going to start with right away, because we've been slapped with it on Twitter and everyone's just like, how the heck do you define Web3? Web3 has so many, aspects to it. So we decided to throw Hung in the fire and explain a little bit about how would you define Web3, Hung?
Yeah, of course. So Web3, I think an easy way to think about it is it's an internet that's built on this concept of decentralization using blockchain technology. And we'll get into like what those concepts mean later on in the session. But when I look at Web3, it's important to understand like what is Web 2 and Web 1, and then we can kind of see the evolution over time. So when we think about Web 1, which is like back in the 90s, early 2000s, when I was using Web 1, it consisted of static websites, portals, message boards, and a lot of what people did on Web 1 was just to public static content and then consume them. And then the next phase of the internet, Web 2, around 2005, we had like platforms that came up like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And so a lot of these users began creating content on these platforms. And so people were actively participating on the internet instead of just reading it. And so what ended up happening and what became a problem for a lot of people was that a lot of these platforms became really big and they monetize on a lot of their users. They have access to our data, our privacy, and they can do things with it that we may not be in approval of. And so that became a huge problem in Web 2. And so as we transition over to Web 3, the concept is that we want to replace these centralized platforms with an open decentralized network that's run and built by the community. And the goal is to shift that scale of power and ownership back to the creators and the users.
Great, and I think, thank you, Hung. And I think that in this talk, we will certainly be covering so many of these terms that you will see kind of make up Web3. But as Elizabeth mentioned before, some things make up Web3, and then it's hard to say sort of what does and doesn't. So I think that that's kind of up to your interpretation. One thing I will say is that it may seem daunting right now, but not only will we go in detail in this talk, but this is exactly what the Hustleverse is for. At the end of the day, the reason we created this community that will have programming to span 4 months is because that's what we want to dive into with each session, right? So if you're watching this and you're kind of like, I have no idea, that just went right over my head again. An hour is not going to be enough time for me to really get it. That's the whole point, is that we're here to kind of introduce it, but we will go in detail about it in the community. So if you are, kind of asking yourself these questions, that's where you should be going. That's where you should be applying. Okay, Hung, thanks for starting us off on that. I know that opens up a whole new can of worms, but let's just keep going. You did tell us about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. And, we did have an audience question where I think like what it comprises, or is the definition continuing to evolve? How do you look at that? Like, is Web 3 just this continuously evolving thing? Have you seen it maybe transition or evolve so far?
Yeah, I think it'll continue to evolve. I think the underlying theme of Web 3 is that it'll have this foundation of decentralization. Just like if someone asks you to explain like what is the internet, how we define it today was different from a decade ago, and how they defined it a decade ago was different from a decade ago from there. So I think as Web3 continues to evolve, we'll see more added to the explanation, but it'll always have this theme of decentralization beneath it.
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of overarching theme of Web3. That's great. Thank you for that. So obviously, as we talk about Web3, we're constantly hearing this concept of the blockchain. So let's talk about that. Can you tell us a little bit about what the blockchain is?
Elizabeth, do you want to?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. If you think about, let's say a bank, let's say I have $100 in my checking account and I send, let's say $5 to Hung, and then I send $10 to Lydia. The bank reconciles all of this with their centralized database. Like they take my $100 and debit out 5 and 10, and they reconcile this with other banks. And everyone's got like their siloed database. Well, the thing is, as we've noticed over time, sometimes there's fraud, sometimes there are mistakes with companies that they make, and people don't always trust banks. And, in certain places, there's more or less trust than others. So enter the blockchain. Well, instead of having a company hold all this information in sort of a hidden abyss that no one else can see, why don't we just open this up to the public and have a public ledger so that way everyone can see all the transactions be available? And that is what the blockchain is. And so then the question is, well, how do you get sort of this public ledger if you don't trust anybody? And that is where the concept of decentralization comes in, where it's like, instead of a particular bank holding the databases, it's now, let's get a bunch of people in the world to have their computers talk to each other to essentially play the role of that centralized database. So in this example, if we wanted to show all of my bank transactions on the internet, what that might look like is, I have my $100, and now let's say, Bob over here has a computer and Sally over here has a computer. They they turn their computers on to effectively help me reconcile my transactions to Hung and Lydia in this manner, such that, in mass, they can validate my transactions and keep track of them as a network.
That was a very high level answer, which I think is extremely helpful. Thank you, Elizabeth. And please, guys, as you're listening to this, throw in your questions, right? If you're like, I don't understand what, Elizabeth said about this, we can certainly go back and explain certain terms. I would love for this to be as interactive as possible because we do have a lot of information to cover. It's always good to stop us and make us re-explain if needed. We are happy to do that. So I understand the blockchain enables different actions, right? Such as money transfers or transfers of assets. And obviously one of its first uses was cryptocurrency. So Hung, do you want to just explain how does cryptocurrency relate to blockchain? I always want to make that connection. And what is cryptocurrency?
Sure. So the easiest kind of explanation for what cryptocurrency is that it's a digital currency that you don't have to rely on banks to verify transactions. So like in Elizabeth's explanation, you have a network of computers that does all the verification for you. And so cryptocurrency is just a digital currency that uses that technology and removes the centralized entity that does all the verification.
Great, awesome. We do have a question from Valerie that I think we could throw in at this point. It's, aren't blockchain transactions becoming resource consuming in a way that is exacerbating climate change? Now, Valerie, in order to answer that, I think we would need to probably explain a few things about how sort of mining works. So actually, why don't we just do that first and then perhaps answer Valerie's question. Who wants to tackle?
I'll actually take a crack at this. So I think a lot of people say this, but the question is, why is it so energy intensive? So let's kind of go back to my example with the bank. In this case, if we're having a public ledger, essentially what is happening is we are recording every single transaction. So in this case, it's like, Elizabeth's got $100 out of my checking account. Now, -5 to Hung, and then -10 to Lydia, and all the other transactions I might be making, ad nauseum. So you have like basically this long chain of transactions. Well, in order for this to be validated, a popular way that people do this today with various blockchains is essentially, every time you validate, you recreate the chain of all the past transactions. So as the chains get longer and longer, it becomes very energy intensive to recreate the whole chain. And at this point, we are many years into, let's say, Bitcoin. So the whole chain of all the transactions out there in the network is pretty huge. And so that is why it is energy intensive, because now you have to, in order to validate this, you have to have a lot of computing power to recreate essentially every chain. So that, I think that's what is called mining. If you are using a computer to essentially, solve these problems to recreate the chain, it is also the most common way that people have set up, blockchain validation to date. Now, because of this energy intensive problem and the chains are getting longer and longer, there's been a lot of conversation about, all right, we need a better way. And that's where maybe some of you have heard of proof of stake. The old way is called proof of work, but like proof of stake is a new way of essentially validating transactions. So instead of going all the way back to like day zero and recreating all the transactions, which by the way is actually pretty secure and foolproof because you're recreating every transaction, we're now moving to a proof of stake model. And you may have heard that the Ethereum blockchain is trying to, migrate into that. And that is not as energy intensive. And frankly speaking, the reason is with that model, you are not going back to day zero. I guess in a traditional ledger, instead of like recreating the whole book, you're starting with, the most recent transactions and starting from there. And so that is a little bit more apt for fraud or potential issues that could go wrong because you're not recreating all the transactions. But that being said, it is also way less energy intensive in this proof of stake model. And that is sort of the migration shift over to that.
Yeah, and I think, to Hung's point, it's, the internet 10 years ago looked very different from the internet today. And I think that's certainly going to be the case with all of these processes, right? It is definitely not something that people are ignoring. It's something people are very aware of, that there is some energy that needs to go into these computations. And I think what we're seeing is that, there are improvements being made, Valerie. So I wouldn't necessarily, I think first when I started researching it, I was also a little bit disappointed. But I mean, if the way technology moves is any indication, we can certainly figure this problem out. And actually something else we're seeing is that a lot of miners are starting to use solar energy to do this. So I think that there's a lot there, and thanks for bringing it up, Valerie. Certainly for the environmentally conscious folks, as we all should be, this is a big topic, but I think there's a lot that can be done there. Great, and please, as per Valerie's example, do throw in your questions in the middle of us talking about it so we can bring them up. So Hung, you explained what cryptocurrency is to us. And so I thought in the same breath, we should probably explain what DeFi is, or decentralized finance, but just like a high level explanation on this, please.
Yeah, so DeFi stands for decentralized finance. So if you think of kind of all the different types of financial services we do with bank today, we borrow, we lend, we earn interest. You can do all of that on a public blockchain. And so DeFi was generally the kind of the first use case of a decentralized app, and that's what made Ethereum popular. But just at a high level sense, anything you can do in banking today, it's just on a public blockchain. That's decentralized finance.
Great, thank you so much, Hung. Okay, let's move on to the difference. What are digital assets, and what's the difference between like cryptocurrency and tokens? Can you explain that to us, please?
Yeah, so a cryptocurrency is a token, but not all tokens are cryptocurrency. So what I mean is like, so as I explained earlier, cryptocurrency is just a virtual currency, but a token is a digital asset that's tradable, and it serves many purposes. So you have governance tokens where people use it as voting power. You have tokens that represent ownership. In this case, NFTs are a good example of that. And then you have cryptocurrencies, tokens that represent currency. So as we continue to build and evolve on Web3, we'll see more use cases for tokens come up.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you didn't want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Okay, cool. I saw your mouth move and I was like, yeah, thank you so much, Hung. And I think that we will definitely get deeper into this. A digital asset could be an NFT, right, Hung? Mm-hmm. And the Hustleverse Passport is an NFT, so we'll certainly dive into NFTs, no problem there. And we will definitely talk about different cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. And as far as tokens goes, there's always a possibility that your projects or any of our projects can use a token. And actually, I will direct you again to Elizabeth's blog post, because she makes a very interesting case for how tokens can change the financing structure of many companies, and I think it's really cool. So Elizabeth, if you want to throw that up at any point, again, I think it's just a really great case for tokens. I do want to come here back to the questions, because some of them are certainly applicable. So Q Chen asks, is there one blockchain in the whole world or many blockchains? Hung?
There are many, actually. And there'll be many more as Web3 evolves. But essentially, all these tokens that you see are either built on someone else's blockchain or they have their own blockchain. So Bitcoin has their own blockchain, Ethereum has their own blockchain, and there are many, and there will continue to be many.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for the question. Lisa asks, isn't there a reason for some transactions to be private? Does the blockchain mean that all transactions are public and that is always a good thing? Elizabeth?
I guess I'll take that one. I mean, so just to be clear, I think there are absolutely many reasons to not put information on a blockchain to this point. The feature is that it is public, so things you do not want public should probably be private. And so I think, this, when people say, oh, Web 2 versus Web 3 or whatever, I think, frankly speaking, what we're seeing is the emergence of a new technology, and there will be many applications for that new technology. And because nothing or not much has been built yet, then there's a lot of greenfield of opportunity. But that is not to say that the way that the internet currently works is dead. Like, I think there will also be much more to come in the current internet as well that is private.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you for the question, Lisa. I do see some questions around coins and mining, but I think what I would love to do first is for us to define and talk a little bit about Bitcoin versus Ethereum so that we can, get to these questions afterwards. So Hung, why don't you start us off about like what Bitcoin is? Why is it the most popular cryptocurrency right now?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, to my understanding, is the first cryptocurrency. the reason why it's very popular is because it's finite. So there will only be 20 million Bitcoins ever in existence. And because it's finite, it behaves a lot like gold, where it's a store of value. And people compare Bitcoin to digital gold. And that's really kind of how they look at it. The way Ethereum is different is Ethereum is built with the concept of smart contract technology. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But the way I look at Ethereum is kind of like an operating system like Windows. And before we had SaaS software, if you wanted to build applications on Windows, you'd have to buy a CD, install it. And so with Bitcoin being this blockchain that uses smart contracts, it attracted a lot of builders to build applications on top of Ethereum. And so when you're building on top of Ethereum, you have to have Ethereum to use to build on it. And then for people who are using these applications, they have to have Ethereum to be able to use the application. And so Ethereum ends up being what I call digital gas. So you need gas to power a lot of things. Similar to like if you were driving on a freeway and you have to pay toll to use the freeway, it's kind of almost how Ethereum operates.
I think to add to that, I mean, if we go back to the example, the banking example, where they run their own centralized database and so many applications in the web do, Google does, Netflix does, they all have their own database that they own and control. If you imagine building applications where you want actually that data exposed, you want it to be public, et cetera, like Ethereum was the first blockchain actually that allowed you to build these applications in this decentralized manner where you no longer have your centralized database, you have all these other people in their computers essentially powering that data and validating the transactions that you would use for your application. And so that is, I would say that is the reason why everyone talks about Ethereum, because all these applications, at least to date, have been built on it because they're one of the OG application blockchains. Bitcoin, you see countries like El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as an actual currency where you can go and pay for food and other stuff with Bitcoin itself. I think there are other emerging market countries that are considering using it as an actual money source. And that is the primary use case of Bitcoin. So apps and money, essentially.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you both so much. I think that was a wealth of information, and I certainly understood what you meant, and I'm a newbie, so I hope everyone else did too. Since we've touched on Ethereum versus Bitcoin, I think it's a good time to talk about smart contracts, because Hung, I do believe that you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So a smart contract is just a program that's stored on the blockchain. And if anyone is a programmer, it's kind of similar to like an if-then function where if you have a smart contract on a blockchain, if certain predetermined conditions are made or are met, then execute the program. And so a lot of these programs that are built on Ethereum, they just run smart contracts. And every time you take an action, that's actually a smart contract happening on a blockchain.
And the interesting thing about that, I don't know if any of you have ever had an employer who did not pay you on time or something like that. I mean, a smart contract, because it's a computer program, it allows you essentially, for better or for worse, when these rules happen, these actions happen. I think in, sort of the human world, people make mistakes, they forget to do things per the contracts. And so even though things may be legally written out on paper, whether they actually happen or not, or whether they happen too late is another question.
And I think this is what always struck me when I read, when the term trustless is being used. I think when you first dive into it, you're like, trustless, that means that I can't trust anybody. But actually, it means you don't need to trust anybody because the actions will be carried out as long as the parameters are met. And I think that that's just so different from how we do business right now. And it takes a little bit of a brain switch to really get. So thank you for covering that. And I think that that allows us to answer some of the questions here. Abu Busui asked, proof of work versus proof of stake. What are your thoughts? And I know that this opens up a bit of a can of worms, but if we could just do a high level kind of comparison. Elizabeth, do you want to take that?
Sure. So this alludes back to the question about energy consumption. So proof of work is the energy intensive one where you're literally recreating all transactions from eternity. Proof of stake is no, let's just take the most recent transaction and have many people validate that. So that way, our chances of having fraud or it being incorrect is very low. And I really think that from a scalability perspective, proof of stake is the way to go, not only from an energy consumption perspective, but from a latency perspective and just all this other stuff. So, and that is the direction that a lot of communities are moving towards. Certainly Ethereum has been talking about for years now, moving towards that, and we'll see when that happens. But I'm very bullish on that model.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And I think everybody just wants to know how you feel about it specifically. Like, what are your specific thoughts? So thanks for sharing that with us. So Manuel's question was about mining, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I would like to still answer this. As more and more of the Bitcoins are moving to proof of stake, does mining become more uninteresting?
It does. So I do want to say, one of the reasons why a lot of people participate in mining is because as a miner, you get rewards for being part of the network. And so as we see more coins move to proof of stake, we're already seeing these mining rewards get cut down, sometimes almost in half. And so I'm actually also interested in seeing how miners respond as we move more coins to proof of stake over proof of work.
And I think actually just clarifying even what mining is, because I think that was a concept that was a head rep for me for a while, which is, so essentially in going back to what is exactly proof of work, it's like recreating the ledger, from scratch. So what that means is you need computers to essentially, do this computation of every single thing. And so that gets harder. That problem gets harder and harder over time as the number of transactions increases, right? And so these miners are essentially these computers that are very high powered for the purpose of essentially being one of these blockchain transaction recreators to verify that, yes, like this is the transactions that have happened, and therefore this most recent transaction is good. And so that's what the miners are actually doing in practice, and they get rewarded for doing this validation of the whole set of transactions. And so, but I agree with Hung in terms of the outcome of it does get less and less interesting over time because there are just fewer opportunities and these chains are getting longer and more computationally intensive.
Great, thank you so much for covering that, Elizabeth and Hung. I do want to touch on Antonia's question because it is interesting, and I think a lot of people have it come up for them. But what can you tell us about the use of crypto to finance illegal activities and whether that makes us foresee intensive regulation to come? So illegal activities.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of regulation happening today. So a lot of platforms are requiring what they call KYC, which is know your customer. And that's because they want to prevent illegal activities like money laundering. A lot of people in the space have a negative sentiment towards that. I think eventually we'll need regulation so that we can get mass adoption. So I see it as a good thing, but already there's a lot of governments trying to add more regulation just so we can make sure like a lot of these legal activities aren't happening in the space.
Yeah. I think that covers it for today's conversation. And again, Antonia, like this is something, these are the kinds of things that we could be possibly discussing in our community. So these bigger questions, I mean, one could go on for hours discussing them. And I think that's the cool thing about being surrounded by people who are both very curious and have really extensive backgrounds themselves as builders and operators, like in Web2, because I think people will have really sort of intelligent opinions on this and perhaps actually know of ways to contribute to the ecosystem and make things safer. So I think this is sort of just the tip of the iceberg of what could happen in a discussion like this. Frank has a question about smart contracts, and I do want to address that and then perhaps move on to some of our other topics. But what are some use cases for smart contracts? So let's just solidify this, Hung.
Yeah, I think if you've ever used any product built on Ethereum, so like bought an NFT on OpenSea, or maybe created a transaction on Uniswap. They're all smart contracts. So that's just the kind of the technology that powers Ethereum. So any action you do, those are smart contracts.
Great, yeah. And just a quick one, can different blockchains be connected?
Yeah, so there's a project called Polkadot, and that's kind of what they're building, where they're building the technology to connect different blockchains. And it's a project that I'm interested in. I think there's a lot of potential there, but we're not there yet. So that's what they're building, and we'll see.
Yeah, cool. That's really cool. I didn't even know that, actually. So thank you for teaching me in this session. So, I mean, we talked about smart contracts. We talked about Ethereum and Bitcoin. Let's touch a little bit on stable coins. What are they, Hung?
So the idea of a stable coin is to offer price stability. Usually stable coins are backed by a reserve asset like gold or the US dollar. And the goal is to reduce volatility. So we know that with cryptocurrency, there's a lot of volatility. So say if I have $100 today in Bitcoin, next month that $100 becomes $500. If I wanted to lock in my profit and maintain that $500, I could trade it into a stable coin so that regardless of what happens to Bitcoin, whether it goes up or whether it goes down, I have my $500. So that's just kind of the gist of what stable coins offer.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this, I'm asking myself, why wouldn't I just convert my Bitcoin into my fiat currency? And for anyone who doesn't know what a fiat currency, also, could you please explain that? But like, why wouldn't I convert it to a US dollar? Why wouldn't I convert it to a Canadian dollar?
Fiat currency is just like you said, the US dollar or any currency that's relative to their country. It's actually not a lot of options. I think in the US, the most common option to convert to fiat is to sell it through Coinbase. But it's easier if there's more options to convert your crypto to a stable coin. And then if you wanted to, for example, buy a different token, then it's easier to just keep it in a stable coin because there are more ways to use that, versus if you convert it to fiat, then you'd have to buy back in and then buy whatever token you bought back in with to buy another token.
I think as a practical example, if any of you have ever bought Bitcoin or Ethereum, let's say using a Coinbase account, you may have noticed that sometimes it can take days to get your money out of your bank or whatever to convert, to actually get the Bitcoin, right? And so if you are really interested in buying and selling a lot of crypto on a much shorter time period, then you may want to actually keep some cash essentially in, let's say, USDC or something, which is a stable coin. So that the latency reason, the delays with traditional banks is a big part of that.
That's great. Yes, thank you both. Hung, then talk to us a little bit about these other coins that we hear about. What are they? And also, what are shitcoins?
Yeah, so any coin other than Bitcoin is considered an altcoin, which stands for alternative coin, and Ethereum is the most popular altcoin. And there's tons. I mean, just hundreds of thousands, more are being created every day. And the concept of a shitcoin is basically an altcoin that has diminished in value so much that it's worthless. So that's why they call it shitcoins.
Okay, and I know that this can open up a whole discussion about cryptocurrency and investing and everything, but we won't do that here. But it's certainly very interesting, and we encourage you all to read about it and educate yourselves there. Okay, we did talk about mining. And I think that we're pretty clear on that. If it's not, please do comment to us, and if you need to know more. But what we didn't talk about is wallets. So Hung, do you want to tell us about the different types of wallets? And actually, this is very important to our audience because we will be asking everyone to have a wallet for the Hustleverse Passport. Sorry, so Hung, take it away.
Yeah. So if you were to buy crypto today, say you have a Coinbase account, you buy crypto, you buy Bitcoin. It's stored on Coinbase, so you actually don't hold it. What we've seen in the past before is that when you leave your crypto on exchange, it could get hacked. And so a lot of people prefer to move it into a wallet because then they control it. So a wallet is just something that holds your crypto. It could be a digital wallet like software. It could be a physical wallet like a USB drive. But what they're really holding is this concept of private and public keys. And so a private key is an encrypted address. And when you have that, you can actually unlock your virtual vault that holds your crypto. It gives you ability to spend it. And so that's something you want to guard with like the utmost amount of security, your private key when you have a wallet. And then your public key is something that's tied to your private key. So think of it as like an email address, right? You can give that away safely because people can use your public keys to receive digital currency. So if Lydia wanted to pay me for lunch and she wanted to pay me in Bitcoin, I can give her my public key and she can use that to pay me with. But the private key is what you want to guard because that's what allows people to spend your cryptocurrency.
And I think just as a quick reminder, because all of this is about decentralization, meaning there isn't one company that has a database. Unlike in other web applications where you lose your password or whatever, you can press the forgot password link or call customer support or whatever. You cannot in this case because there is not a central company who can help you out. Yeah. So that's both a plus and a minus, right? Like it's you all understand the pluses and the minuses. You could lose your account. They could kick you off Twitter. They could kick you off this platform for whatever reason they want. But in a decentralized world, nobody can kick you off. But the flip side is you have to be responsible for your own account. And in doing so, to Hung's point, holding on to essentially your equivalent of a login information in case you forget your password for your wallet, that's the only way to recover it. And if you don't have that recovery mechanism, then you are out of luck. And actually an astounding, I want to say it's something like over 20% of Bitcoin is lost due to people losing their, like not forgetting or not remembering their passwords and their seed phrases. Like it is, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that people lose this stuff, but that is something that I would like to just sort of highlight and flag.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, again, there is no support hotline if you make a mistake. So always take a couple breaths, slow it down before you make a transaction. Just make sure you have everything correctly. Like if you are sending crypto from one wallet to another, I always send a very small amount first, just to make sure it gets there correctly. And then once you verify it, then you can send larger amounts. I've made mistakes where I've sent crypto without verifying the wallet, or maybe I made a typo and then it's gone forever. And so that's something that I had to learn the hard way. But again, that's the point of having the Hustleverse, so that we can teach you a lot of our mistakes and just to make sure you're well aware of how to do things correctly.
Yeah, and I think safety is a huge piece for us. We're always talking about it. How are we going to communicate and educate our community about how to stay safe while playing in Web3. So I think that does speak to that. Hung, I do want to go a little bit deeper because people hear of these hardware wallets, paper wallets. Why would I want one?
So there's a couple different versions of a wallet. A software wallet is easiest to access because it lives on your computer or it lives on your phone or the web browser. And we can do a whole session just on wallets alone and how I structure my wallets. But generally with software wallets, you don't want to have a lot in there just because the possibility for it to be compromised is very high. And so if you have holdings that you just want to put away and kind of store it, generally I recommend something like a hardware wallet. And the two most popular ones are Ledger and Trezor. And what it is, it's a USB drive that connects to your wallet, and you have to have the actual device to transact. So every time you make a transaction, you have to confirm it on the device. And so that adds a layer of security so that it's harder to compromise your wallet. And then a paper wallet is like a kind of like a very old version of a wallet. So before they had digital wallets, you just had like a printout of your private key on a piece of paper, and that acted as your wallet, and you can put that in a safe or a safety deposit box.
I would say if this is intimidating people, like, oh my God, like I can't lose this stuff, or I don't know where to store my hardware wallet. Do I put it under my bed? I would say that actually this space is rapidly evolving. Coinbase, for example, has rolled out a couple of, and not to be an ad for them per se, but like they have rolled out a couple of programs where you can actually pay for a layer of protection where, you pay them some subscription fee. And if your account is compromised, like they will, reverse the transaction. So there are services like that now where if you don't want to have to store everything yourself, there are, there's everything in between where it actually starts to look more centralized. And sometimes centralization, I would say, is a good thing. So you're going to see a blend of centralized solutions for some things where it's more practical, but decentralized applications for other things.
Yeah. And I think that that's actually answering Ravi's question that I wanted to bring up, which is there an alternative to having a wallet, i.e. something that's more similar to a regular bank account? So I think that that pretty much answers it, that, this tool Coinbase has created, and I'm sure that there is more coming, considering that it's becoming more mainstream and people just feel more comfortable with it looking like a bank account. Yeah, you'd agree? Okay, great. Okay, so I think that covers some of the questions that we've gotten on this topic. Again, please, if you have any questions about, crypto, we can certainly come back to it and talk about it. But at this point, I think I want to take the last 15 minutes and move on to NFTs, considering that they're going to be a pretty important part of getting access into the Hustleverse. So Hung, do you want us to tell us a little bit about NFTs?
Yeah, so I'll just use the same example I did last week. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's just a way to tie ownership of a digital asset back to you as the owner. So again, if I have $1 and say I lost $1 and Linda gives me $1, she just replaced my dollar, right? So that example is of a fungible token. Non-fungible means irreplaceable. So if I have $1 that I made from my very first business, and I have it framed and one day it's missing, even if Lydia gives me $1, it's not the same because that dollar I had some type of intrinsic value I assigned to it. So NFTs are just a digital asset that has some value that's assigned to it, and then the tokenization technology just ties it back to whoever the owner is.
Yeah, and all of that explains why a rock can be sold for, tens of millions of dollars, or as I was looking up recently, like some of the most, basic projects starting at $4,000, like I can't believe it. But, we'll dive deeper into that. So Hung, I guess let's start with, it's a digital asset, and it could be anything. Very often we've seen it to be art. And where can I buy it? Let's say right now I want to go explore NFTs. Where should I go?
Right. So there are two ways generally. So first is you buy it from the project. And there's this term called minting. And a lot of people have asked, well, what does minting mean? So minting is when you take a digital asset and then you add it to the blockchain and it becomes purchasable. And so the first purchase made is called a mint. And then every purchase after that is just a sale, right? So minting is generally the first purchase of that NFT. And a lot of projects, when they create NFTs, you can mint it directly from the project website itself. If you want to buy an NFT after that, you can also buy it on secondary markets. So OpenSea is a very popular secondary platform where a lot of these projects will make their NFTs available on there, or people who own the NFTs, if they decide they wanted to sell, they can sell on there. And so buyers can go on secondary markets and buy NFTs.
Okay, great. Again, the topic of NFTs is just so huge that you could certainly have more than one session related to it. And I think if you could explain sort of the value behind NFTs, because certainly when you first look at it, you're like, why? JPEGs online sold for this much money. What creates value in an NFT?
I think the best way to look at it is to look at things that we are familiar with. So what makes certain arts very valuable? I think a lot of it is like scarcity. Some of it is how we place value on it. So like art is something comparable. Trading cards is something comparable. if you look at the video game Fortnite, I think they made like 4 billion in digital skins last year. That's something comparable that we can look at and think about how it creates value or how does it derive value. But also with NFTs and how they're evolving, a lot of value comes from the utility. So for example, these days, the easiest form of utility and what we're doing here with the Hustleverse is we're providing access. So if you hold an NFT, you have access to certain benefits. And in our case, it's a community. And so depending on how much value the community provides to its users, sometimes the NFT will drive a lot of value because people want to be a part of the community. And if they can't purchase the NFT, they have to go to a secondary market. And then when something's on the secondary market, the value is derived by people who are selling it and what they determine what it's worth. So there's a lot of variations, there's a lot of variables, but that's kind of a quick answer to that.
In many ways, to this latter point that Hung is making, it's becoming like a key to a membership of sorts. And so for the Hustleverse, actually, just to sort of give us a plug here and reiterate, if you are part of the Hustleverse, we will go into all of these topics in a lot more depth over the course of 4 months. And I think specifically with the context of landing a job or a part-time role with a crypto project or company, we think that there needs to be a lot of amazing talent such as yourselves moving into the space. And, although a lot of people have gotten interested in moving into crypto, it's not enough to build and improve better tooling in UX and infrastructure. So we want to encourage all of you who have an interest in Web3 to apply to the Hustleverse. The education, knowledge, networking are the big benefits to holding an NFT, the Hustleverse NFT, because it gives you access to all of those things.
Yeah, and I think that, sort of the benefits of it don't run out after the 4 months. It's certainly something that can evolve. Something I learned from Hung, that there's such a thing as a genesis, right? NFT, Hung, am I using everything correctly?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll see the word genesis as part of an NFT collection, and that just means that it is the very first collection. So if they continue to build on top of that collection, the Genesis collection is the first edition of it.
Yeah. And
the other thing is, I actually think the Bored Apes Yacht Club, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's gotten a lot of press. They're a large group. Jimmy Fallon has bought into it. I think other stars like Paris Hilton as well. I think the benefits that are stated in the beginning often grow with time as well. So, for them, if you look at them, initially it was, I get this cool monkey image and I get to hang out with other people who bought it. But over time, you see people doing things like opening up restaurants around the concept of their ape, or, playing games that they have access to just with these club members, et cetera. So, I think in our case, we're just getting started. The initial set of benefits is the knowledge and education, the networking with this community, connections with potential crypto companies. But over time, we intend to, as part of the larger Hustle Fund family, roll out other things. While we can't speak about any of those plans now, we do allude to some of them on the website of what may be coming down the pipe.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks, Hung. And, it seems we're quickly running out of time and there's still so many things we wanted to cover. But there is Discord that I do want to cover because it will be used, again, as part of the Hustleverse. So Hung, can you just tell us a little bit about what Discord is and what's the point of using it?
Yeah. So if anyone remembers like AOL chat rooms, Discord is very similar to that. It's a platform that operates like a chat room. So it enables people to join, chat through text or voice over IP and interact. It became very popular in gaming communities, and then that transferred over to crypto communities. So that's what we'll be using for the Hustleverse community. And it just operates like a platform for chatting, but it also has channels, so similar to like what you would see in a Slack channel. It's not the best, but it's probably the ones that is most popular at the moment. And there's certainly some security risks with Discord. So we'll make sure that we educate you as much as we can on how to prevent yourself from being exploited in Discord and to make it a really fun experience for you.
Great. Yes, thank you.
And again, one of the reasons we are doing some of these mechanisms, such as we'll handhold you through using Discord and talk about best practices, and why we're also doing the NFT membership is to familiarize you with some of these tools, since the purpose of this is to, move into crypto and work with other crypto companies. And these are things that they are using and doing. So yes, we could have done this on Slack, and yes, we could have done this, without an NFT per se. But the idea is by doing, you often learn more than just by talking. And so we intend to handhold people. So if you've never used Discord, or you find it thoroughly confusing, or you're worried about some of the scams you've heard of online, don't worry about it. The baseline knowledge we're expecting for people to come in is absolutely nothing. And we're going to walk through all of these things over the course of the next 4 months. It's hard to talk about everything in one session for an hour, but we will have 4 months to go through these things in more detail with, with good support.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And, we're just trying to expose everyone to what's out there while we're still by their side to help them out. Look, we're running out of time, and we did want to talk about DAOs. So I don't want to entirely skip over it because DAOs are part of Web3. So Elizabeth, can you give us a high-level definition of DAOs so we can perhaps just tease it and you guys can go and research them for yourselves?
Yeah. So just like how blockchain essentially is a decentralized database, now people are thinking about decentralized everything, and that includes companies. So your traditional company is like, well, you all know what a company is, but you can imagine, well, what if it's actually sort of decentralized and it's open, a lot of people can join it in a variety of different capacities. Maybe there is a core team because you do need some order in the chaos, but for example, there was the Constitution DAO a couple of months ago, and tens of thousands of people were in there. There was a core team, but like literally there were tens of thousands of other people in there. So that is the concept of a decentralized autonomous organization.
Amazing that you gave like an exam answer, like boom, boom, boom. Yeah, I do want to say, please do research this on your own, and perhaps a good plug for Whiteboard Crypto on YouTube. They do an amazing job of walking you through these concepts. So please do research this, and DAOs will certainly be up for discussion in the next sessions with us. So this is definitely not the end of it. I want to answer a couple quick questions that came in recently. Valerie's asking, if you have a Coinbase account, can you buy NFTs through that?
Not today. Coinbase is creating their NFT market. That's gonna launch fairly soon. I don't have a timeline, but if you have a Coinbase account today, you cannot buy it directly. You could move your crypto over to a MetaMask wallet or another wallet, and then use that to transact on a platform like OpenSea to buy an NFT. But as far as Coinbase goes, not at the moment.
And we will walk through actually the process of setting up a MetaMask wallet, which will enable you to transact with NFTs. And in the case of minting the Hustleverse NFT, that is what we will use.
Great. Thank you. And for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, I apologize. I do want to say the reason we probably didn't get to them is because they were quite open-ended, opened up a big discussion, and I am sorry we were strapped for time today. Couple ways we can remedy that is, one, join the Hustleverse so you can talk to us about that in great detail. A couple of you had questions specifically for Hung. He'll be available there. And secondly, I would say if you're really, it's a burning question, connect with us on Twitter and, add Hung Fam, and he'll answer your question. I'm sure. I've just put you on the spot, Hung, so you have no choice now. Thank you so much for joining. We will certainly begin reaching out to all of our applicants very soon. We're still kind of trying to make sure that we curate an amazing community where there are equal parts of sort of all different levels and professions. And I do want to say that there will be an event next week with Jamie Schmidt. who created Schmidt Naturals, and then went to do crypto packaged goods, and then went on to do BFF, which is a community specifically for women in crypto. So this will be focused a little bit on women on crypto. I do want to say it's not going to be your usual sort of, let's just plug women into the ecosystem and see how it turns out. But one thing to note is that women are helping create the Web3 ecosystem. So we'll dive deeper into that, but certainly this is a session for everybody. So do join us for that. And with that, I think that we're good to go for today. The recording will be sent out to you by email if you're registered for the event. Elizabeth, Hung, do you want to add anything else?
It was fun. I hope to see many of you in the community, and had a lot of fun. So make sure to apply.
Yeah,
and
do apply.
Come to the Jamie event next week. She is amazing. She's had a 9-figure exit. CPG and BFFs are 2 crypto communities that are doing incredibly well. You'll definitely want to hear her speak.
Yeah, she's a rock star.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you next week and on the Hustleverse application page. Bye.
Thank you all.